Two meetings before this meeting. We'll just get set up here and get going. Welcome to the July 9th, 2024 regular business meeting of the McMinnville City Council. I'd like to call the meeting to order.
Recording in progress.
Oh, thank you. Good evening and welcome to the regular McMinnville City Council business meeting of July 9th, 2024. I'd like to call the meeting to order and ask the Deputy City Recorder to do a roll call, please.
Councillor Geary.
Good evening.
Councillor Menke.
Here.
Councillor Chenoweth.
Here.
Councillor Peralta.
Here.
Council President Garvin.
Here.
And Mayor Dropkin.
Here, thank you.
And I would like to note that Councillor Payne is absent today.
Excused absence, thank you. Let's see, if you are able, please join us to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And Councillor Menke, would you please lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We are now at the portion of the evening where we take comments from community members. Any interested audience member is invited to provide comment to the council. Any comments provided that require follow-up will be assigned to a staff member. Anyone may speak on any topic other than a matter in litigation, a quasi-judicial land use matter, or a matter scheduled for public hearing today or at some future dates. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person for a total of 30 minutes. If you are on Zoom and you wish to speak, please use the raise your hand feature, and when your turn is up, we will announce your name and unmute your mic. You may also send a chat directly to the Deputy City Recorder. When you come up to testify, please be sure to announce your name and the city that you live in for the record. And please remember to fill out a public comment card to submit to the Deputy City Recorder for the record. And do we have anyone signed up in advance?
We have had someone sign up, but just to note, Mark Davis's letter regarding Resolution 2024-41 and City Attorney Leitenberg's Recology Accountants Review Report, and also Councillor Peralta's document that should be on all of your dioceses will all be entered into the public record on the amended package, which will be posted tomorrow. And the first person that we have signed up is Tamsin.
Thank you. Welcome. Nice to see you. Thank you for coming. There will be a timer that's on the screen so that you'll be able to watch your own time. And when you're ready, please, you're welcome to stand or sit. And then just remember to state your name and the city where you reside for the record. Okay.
My name, sorry, I'm nervous.
It's okay. And do you want to pull the microphone a little closer to you? You won't have to be as loud.
My name is Tamsin Cranmer, and I live here in McMinnville with my husband and my son. We live in the Project Turnkey Motel. And I just wanted to come up, wanted to talk about the homelessness, but different than everybody else talks about, because I watched a lot of things. I watched discussions, I've watched a lot of that, and I never see anybody talking about why the behaviors are happening as they're happening, or the trauma that drives it, or the brain damage from that. And I got to looking into this because I was starting to watch the progression with certain people over the years, and started to experience it myself. I call it, I was going feral is what I called it. And I think that if more people were educated on this and if they understood exactly the actual damage, it's reversible, but the actual damage that's done to a person's brain being in fight or flight constantly and the other daily stressors, not to mention there's a vast majority of the people out there that have had traumatic brain injuries, and they might look and sound like they're speaking the same language as us, but they really don't. They don't understand things the same way. And I think that if people understood this and if it would be a part of the discussion when things are talked about with that, it would change the way people interact, because you can get a lot more out of people and a lot more help from them if you are able to understand that they're not, they don't comprehend things in the same way. It takes time. And I want to be a help with that. It's important. A lot of these people that are out there, they're my family. Sorry.
You're okay. Take a moment.
And I just want to be part of helping him to get better. There's things, I'm sorry. I'll come back and finish.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
You're doing a great job. Thank you so much. Thank you for testifying today. Is there anyone else that is signed up for public comment?
No one else has signed up for public comment.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here that would like to provide public comment today? Is there anyone on Zoom that would like to provide public comment? Thank you. We now have a presentation from Recology, and I'd like to welcome Government and Community Relations Manager Dan Blue to introduce the topic today. Nice to see both of you, actually. All right.
Good evening, Mayor Drabkin, members of council. My name is Dan Blue, and I'm the Government Relations Manager for Recology Northern Oregon.
My name is Ernie Martin, and I'm the Operations Manager for Recology Western Oregon here in the Valley, McMinnville.
Thanks for giving us some time to present to you tonight. If we could go to the next slide. Just a few things to cover this evening. Do I have a clicker or? There we go. Thank you. Just a few things to cover tonight. We're going to provide just a little bit of an overview about Recology, the company, talk a little bit about our collection services here in McMinnville and in Yamhill County in the Valley here, talk a little bit about the rate review process and our proposed rate adjustment, share a few items of news with you, and then save some time at the end for questions. So next slide, please. I just wanted to start off, and this might be familiar to some of you, but Recology is an employee-owned company. It's really a core part of our culture. We're the largest employee-owned garbage company in the country, and the only one in Oregon. What that means for us is that only no one employee can own more than 1% of the company. And so that keeps those revenues come back to the employees who reside in this community and don't travel out of state to Houston or New York or other places. And so it really helps us stay connected to the work we do and focus on safety, efficiency, and strong customer service and service delivery. So next slide, please. A little bit about Recology, a little bit hard to see on this slide, but we have over 3,700 employees. We provide collection services in 137 different communities. We operate transfer stations. We have a variety of services up and down the West Coast. We are a West Coast-based company. You can see McMinnville on the map there. So next slide, please. So I think this is yours, Ernie.
Sorry.
Moving
Sorry.
quick.
So in the Northern Oregon area, we have these facilities, transfer stations in McMinnville and in Astoria. We have compost facilities in McMinnville, Almsville, North Plains. We do operate the largest transfer stations in the Portland metro area for Metro, Metro South and Metro Central transfer stations, and we also have a couple collection companies in the Portland metro area.
Slide.
Before I go on to this, I wanted to talk a little bit about our customer service. The good news is we are finally fully staffed. The bad news is we experienced a cyber event back in late October. Corporate saw it coming. They shut down all of our operating systems, and they weren't back up running fully until sometime in February. We just, right in November, we hired a new customer service manager and 2 CSRs, and unfortunately, they didn't get the training that they deserved. But our hold times are getting better. We're still working on it. I feel like we've turned that page and we're going in the right direction. All right, I actually have some notes to kind of help me with all this, so bear with me here. It's a great place to work, employee ownership, steady employment, competitive wages and benefits, a positive respect-based culture along with life-work balance helps make Recology Western Oregon a great place to work. Between our 3 sites in McMinnville, we have approximately 70 Recology employee owners that live here in Mac or nearby surrounding communities. Currently, we have 29 route drivers that have been with the company from 1 all the way up to 47 years, with an average tenure of about 12 years. Services that we provide in McMinnville, we provide residential, commercial, multifamily, and drop box. For residential, we have approximately 10,000 residential customers in McMinnville. We offer 32-gallon or 90-gallon trash, along with every other week commingled recycling, glass, and yard debris. Also, McMinnville customers can bring their yard debris to our organic site here in town at no extra charge. Next slide. Next slide. Events and services that we sponsor. We support many nonprofits and events in the city of McMinnville in way of monetary or in-kind donations. Here's a list of those, some of those that we support. McMinnville Air Show, Juliet's House, Homeward Bound Pets, See You Later Foundation, Willamette Valley Cancer Foundation, Provoking Hope, Cruise in McMinnville, McMinnville High School Grad Night, McMinnville High School Baseball, McMinnville Chamber of Commerce, the Lemonade Day and other events, McMinnville Downtown Association, parades that we participate in. The Santa Parade, we do that every year. We didn't do the Alien Days this year. As you can see, that picture was actually from Channel 8 News. Looking pretty good there. But Alien Days was so much fun, so we're hoping to do that again here too.
Thank you. Next slide. So going from Alien Days Parade to rate review, so that's a hard shift. But so I'm going to talk a little bit about how we do rate setting and what we're proposing for a rate adjustment for this year. So let's see. So in your packet, you have a number of documents. One is a rate review report. I don't expect you to read that thing up on the screen there, but it is in your packet. We provide that every year. And it shows what our 2023 actuals were in terms of revenues and expenses. And then the far right column is our projections on what our costs and our revenues are projected to be. So let's see, there's, So there's a couple of different ways that the franchise agreement allows for rates to be adjusted. One of them is essentially a CPI-based annual I wouldn't call it a cost of living, but it is an annual incremental adjustment, which is capped at 4%. A separate approach to rate setting is through what's called a rate review. And we, every year, provide essentially the same information, which constitutes a rate review, but we don't always have to use the rate review process. In the franchise itself, it allows for an operating range of 85 to 91%. And if we are projected based on what our projected revenues and what our projected costs are for the current 12-month period, if we're projected to fall outside of that operating range, then the franchise stipulates that rates shall be set to an 88% operating ratio. So what we've looked at after we've allocated all of our costs for McMinnville and the other cities and jurisdictions that we serve out of Ernie's shop, without a rate adjustment, we show that we would fall outside of that range at 92.35%. So in order for us to add the additional operating revenue requirement, we're proposing a 4% rate increase, and that would get us to not the 88%, but just a little bit outside of that at 88.98%. Due to the delays related to our cyber incident, we did earlier ask the city for an extension on the rate review process, so we're already a month kind of behind what we would normally be doing. And so these rates wouldn't go effective July 1 as normal. They would go into effect on August 1st of this year. Let me just make sure I've covered everything there. Yeah, so next slide, please. So what would that mean for some of the most common customers, which are both in the 32-gallon weekly garbage service category and the 90-gallon weekly garbage service category? That includes recycling, yard debris, and glass. So it would, this 4% rate increase would be about $1.42, or would be $1.42 per month for that weekly garbage service. For the 90-gallon customer, that would translate to $2.37 increase per month, again, for that weekly service. That works out to about 32 cents a week at the 32 level and 55 cents a week for the 90-gallon customer. So that is the proposed rate adjustment. It's a little bit off the 88% target, but we also acknowledge that COVID, where people are still coming out of COVID and still struggling. We do see a lot of inflationary pressures this year. That's the piece that I didn't talk about when I should have. Some of the inflationary drivers for us are, the CPI was 3.3% year over year. We are continuing to invest in our employees so we are seeing some labor cost increases, and part of that is for retention. It's better for us to maintain our employees than have to go out and hire and do replacement. We're also still experiencing some supply chain issues related to both equipment and materials, especially in our shop, and that's an area where we're continuing to see, kind of lingering COVID pressure on our services. So those are some of the primary drivers of why we're seeing cost increases in our projections. So I think that's it on the rate review stuff. We can come back to that with your questions in just a sec. I just wanted to get to the last slide before we do so. Just a few announcements. We are looking at we have actually implemented some improvements at our recycling depot. As Ernie mentioned, no, maybe you didn't, we had to stop taking expanded polystyrene or styrofoam back in March because the local market for that material disappeared. They shuttered their business. And so that went away. And because of the bulkiness of styrofoam, we weren't able to stockpile it without knowing that there would be a reliable market for it. So we did take that service out of the recycling depot, but we have recently added additional plastic recycling, including plastic lids, bread tags, straws, plastic utensils. Many of the materials that the McMinnville Plastics Recycling Project folks collect at their 3 times a year collection events, we're now providing year-round collection for those items at our recycling depot. Also, we're going to be adding fluorescent bulb recycling year-round at our transfer station as well for a small fee. So those are some improvements that we're making on the recycling depot here in McMinnville. Another thing that I'm really excited to announce is that we have posted the zero waste position, or zero waste specialist position, that will serve just the valley. It won't serve at the coast or anywhere else. It'll just be focused here. And we are actively recruiting for that, and our first interview with one of our candidates is on Thursday this week. So I'm excited about that. Finally, you may have heard about the Recycling Modernization Act, which is legislation that was passed a couple of years ago at the Oregon legislature, and it's going to update the entire state's recycling system. It does a few key things. One of them is it creates a uniform statewide recycling list, and then also a separate list that will be focused on harder to recycle materials, including styrofoam. And that will kick into gear on July 1st of 2025. The Recycling and Modernization Act also funds improvements for recycling depots across the state, as well as recycling services at the curb. It provides $3 per capita for every jurisdiction in the state to do additional education and contamination reduction. Let's see, it also provides some funding for the material recovery facilities. Those are the folks who get all the commingled recycling and sorted it into different streams so that it can go to market. And then, most importantly, it sends essentially a bill to all the product manufacturers to pay for this so that it's no longer being paid for by the ratepayers. What that does for the citizens of McMinnville is it'll take some of the pressure off of us by paying for some of those parts of the recycling system from the manufacturers so that it can mitigate potential future rate increases associated with recycling market volatility. So it's a good thing for the state of Oregon. It's going to really change things. We're in the early stages of planning for that. I will be drafting a 100+ questions survey on behalf of McMinnville and sharing it with the city before we submit that, just to give them a sense, the folks who are administering this, a sense of what's needed in this community and what we currently provide. So those are some key updates, and I think that concludes my talking points.
Thank you so much. Does anybody have questions at this time? Councilor Peralta?
I'll have several, so if you want to go to other members first.
Well, why don't you go ahead and start.
Thank you.
Like everybody is going to have questions, so.
I'll just ask a few to start out with, and I'll probably come back and have some more questions at the end. Thank you. So the letter that you sent did a good job of explaining the nature of the contract and the profit margin that Recology is eligible for. I'm a little vague on what the performance requirements are for Recology in terms of deliverables for finding end markets for recyclable materials and hitting diversion rates. And I'm also unclear as to how effective Recology's efforts have been in diversion of solid waste materials. So I was wondering, I didn't see it in the packet this time, but do you have a report, maybe a 10-year report on diversion rates that you can share with us? And then if you could answer the question in terms of the performance requirements.
Yeah, I can try to cover that. I definitely don't have the 10-year history. I think last time I saw it, we can get that for
You can get it for us,
Yeah,
though?
absolutely. That's produced by the state of Oregon, and we submit data to them on an annual basis, and then they kick out a statewide report that's broken out by wayshed and large jurisdictions.
Can you provide it for McMinnville for like a 10-year period?
In terms of the obligations, we are, required to provide certain level of services curbside. Because you're a city of over 4,000, the state requires certain types of services around recycling, waste prevention activities, and we are in compliance with the state on all of those. The franchise itself, I'm a little less familiar with if there's specific customer service or what types of service requirements. Maybe you have some information on that, but we're expected to provide the service at a reasonable rate, share all of our data annually around our costs and revenues. We're open to having our books looked at, and I think the city has done that in the past. I don't know if you want to add anything.
I don't have
Okay. So maybe, do you have a more specific question?
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of getting at, when Carl Peterson was the executive director here, or the branch head, he was very committed to diversion and trying to ensure that as few as possible of our products were ending up in landfills. And so it seemed like a big part of the company's core mission at that time. But since he's left, we haven't really had a lot of reporting on what you're up to try and improve the diversion rates and try and really focus on recycling, and to justify using Recology as a hauler instead of somebody else.
Sure, that's a great question. And we are a materials management company. While we own 2 landfills in California, they were not something we intended to acquire. They came with other acquisitions, so we do focus on material recovery and curbside. What I'm hearing is that there may have been some reporting done in the past that you're not seeing yet, but in terms of our commitment to promoting recycling, promoting waste reduction, reducing contamination. We do things like cart tagging to let customers know that there's materials in their cart that shouldn't be in there. And then everything we collect as a recyclable, by both our kind of moral code and our company's mission, but also by state law, has to go to recovery. And so we are focused on that, and I don't know if you want to add anything about that.
I think that's good. We've been working with multifamily accounts on the recycling. It's one of the most difficult customers to have a clean product, but we're constantly going out to multifamily accounts, working with them as well, and making sure they have the information they need and the education.
And I'm really excited about the Waste Zero Specialist, because that has been a gap that, as we're finally filling that position, that person will be responsible for working with schools, working with multifamily, working with nonprofits. We have done some partnership with Waste Zero McMinnville, or Zero Waste McMinnville, done a number of presentations on what's recyclable and what's not for Rotaries, for different events that they've hosted. So we're trying to do that piece, and we are committed to it. But yes, I think there's been a gap in reporting, and I will get you diversion data for the last 10 years.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, so on the proposed fee expansion, I was confused by a couple of things in the letter. So one of the justifications for the rate increase here in McMinnville was the letter mentioned 3 or 4 things, but one of the things that it mentioned was increased labor costs on the coast.
That was a typo. My apologies for
Okay.
that. Yeah.
So, but the broader question, I guess, is what are you attempting cost recovery for services from McMinnville ratepayers solely for the franchise, or is our share going to reduce the costs for Valley ratepayers and Coast ratepayers?
Yeah, that's a great question. No, I apologize for the typo in that letter. So I support 23 different jurisdictions, and that was my mistake. No, we use an allocation method based on driver hours for all the jurisdictions that we serve here in the Valley, and there's a very big gap between the Valley and the coast operations. But within the Valley itself, some of our routes do cross jurisdictions. They might pick up in McMinnville, and they might pick up in, Carlton. But those are separated out through an allocation methodology that hasn't changed in the probably 20 years that we've been collecting here, 13 as Recology. So it is broken out by jurisdiction. And so no resources that McMinnville residents pay us are utilized to buffer or support any of the other jurisdictions' rate structures. So that's why you'll see different rate adjustments for each of the cities that we've been working with. And they're not all 4.7, some of them are higher and some of them are lower. We'll be in Yamhill tomorrow evening for a little bit larger request, because that's how the numbers worked out.
Okay. Just one more question, Mayor, if I could. So you mentioned the Oregon Recycling Modernization Act, and I understand that we're eligible for funding. You mentioned that we're eligible for funding, both you as a hauler and the local government, for different categories of funding through that program. You mentioned the $3 per capita per year for contamination reduction programming. I understand that on the 24th of this month, there's a survey due back by jurisdictions related to expansion of recycling services.
Yep.
Has Recology put in, or have you been working with the city to identify expansion opportunities in McMinnville, and can you share what those are if you have, and are we going to hit that timeline of the 24th?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you're referring to the Oregon Recycling System Optimization Project questionnaire, which we have not done yet. There was a month extension on that because that that planning process lined up exactly with the rate review process. So a lot of the cities and hauling community across the state asked for an extension. So that is on my plate. I am working with Jeff on the city staff to draft that response. It is really focused on current numbers of accounts, types of trucks, like how many routes we have. It's really focused on the current state so that they can assess that statewide and look at how they're going to distribute revenues to different jurisdictions. And really, the revenues are your revenues. The city will have the opportunity to say, we want to take that money ourselves and then give some of it to Recology or use it ourselves for the purposes of the RMA. Or you'll have an opportunity later this fall to say, to make it streamlined, let's just delegate those resources directly to Recology. So we will be working with city staff long before there is any commitments of like to projects or potential, how to use money that might come out of it. We'll be working with the city staff to identify what those are and come back to you with some suggestions. Right now, you have a pretty robust curbside recycling collection program, as well as there's a pretty robust recycling depot. Compared to other parts of the state that have no recycling at all, curbside. So it's a little bit more of a fine-tuned conversation for a city like McMinnville compared to somewhere that doesn't have curbside recycling. So I hope that kind of answers some of the questions.
Yeah, it does. I mean, and can you help me, and I think this will be useful for the board. When I was reading through the DEQ materials, they talked about, and I'm going to forget the term, but basically a closed system city. Is that perhaps you have the better term, but
yeah, you might be referring to the end markets, and that that's one of the things that there's a whole bunch in the RMA, and I tried to just do a high level. But one of the things that the RMA establishes is that all recycling materials have to go to verifiable and credible end markets, whereas in the past a lot of material got bundled together and shipped to Asia. One of the reasons that the RMA is the way it is that they want to invest in the system at the curb, at depots, at the transfer facilities like ours, at the material recovery processors, and then at the end market. And so there's a lot of money that's going to come into the state to kind of support this system to ensure that no materials go to poor recycling markets, like, just being dumped in Asia. Is that kind of address?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I've heard that Recology was involved in some conversations around doing more with composting, like the soldier fly composting and some of that. And I haven't really heard much from Recology about plans in that area. So I'm curious, because it sounds like what you're describing is a bit of status quo, and maybe we'll come up with some new plans in the next year or something. Is that accurate, or have you been doing more sort of preliminary planning to move us in a direction? Because I feel like we've partnered with Recology over the years because out of sort of an expectation that we're going to get a higher level of service towards recovery rather than just hiring another hauler.
Yeah.
'Cause I feel like a lot of companies can be our hauler.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that question. Composting is entirely separate from the RMA, so that's not going to be a benefit. The good news for the city of McMinnville is that you have the opportunity to look at potentially looking at commercial food waste collection or food waste in yard debris. That would require some changes at our current composting facility in McMinnville, because we're not permitted to accept anything but green waste at this point. But if you're interested in really going after that, and the entire Portland metro area has already head down that road, is to add food waste into residential curbside yard debris, but they have a facility to take it to, which is Recology North Plains. So that's one way to really increase your diversion. 30% of most of the waste stream is still organic material going to landfill, and so that's like the bigger chunk. In terms of recycling, the RMA funds will provide the opportunity for improvement, better education, less contamination, and less cost to ship it to the processing facilities. And so all of that can translate to us focusing more on improving recycling here in the city.
Great. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for the indulgence, Mayor.
Thank you. We're just going to go right down the line here. Councilor Menke.
You mentioned you were going to receive reviewed statements soon. Have you received them yet? I'm just out of curiosity.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
You mentioned in your letter that you were expecting reviewed statements soon, that you didn't have them for
Yes,
the time for the report.
they were provided a couple of weeks after that letter went out. That is the third-party financial review, which should also be in your packet.
Yes, okay. Oh, okay, is that the bottom part? I apologize, I didn't realize it was a reviewed statement.
It may be in your packet, I'm not 100% sure, but it was provided to the city. So every year, we have a third-party firm that evaluates our business operations and provides an updated report. And so we do provide that to the city. We just didn't have it the day we sent those other 3 documents.
So have we
Just,
received those reviewed statements?
Mr. Leitenberg?
I believe that went to all of you by email today and is on your dais right now.
Okie dokie.
On the dais.
It's not on the dais that I can see.
The second, there's 2 attachments.
So you should have 4 documents total. One is the cover letter. One is what's labeled the cost of service report, which is this one. And then there's the proposed rates. And then there's a 4th document, which is a third-party review, third-party financial review by a separate
Cost of service
consulting.
report.
It's an email that came in about 6 hours ago.
Sorry, I missed it entirely. Okay, thank you. And I assume that there was a fair amount of go-between you and the city in the process of putting this all together.
I'm sorry, a little bit hard of hearing.
Okay, I'm sorry. My apologies. I have a soft voice. I assume that there was a fair amount of discussion between you and the city and analysis on these reports as it happened over the last few months.
Yeah, so when I was talking about the rate review process, once the city receives all of our documents, they review it for accuracy, and we did have a meeting with City Manager Towery and Attorney, forgot your name, sorry, David, to make sure that everything that we submitted is consistent with the expectations of the franchise agreement, and nothing has changed in terms of our methodology, and honestly, we're pretty good at our projections, and if you look at previous year rate review reports, the projections are pretty close to what they ended up being, and so that is another layer of confidence. The city has full right through the franchise to take a closer look at our books. I will say that we provide every year the full rate review process, even though we sometimes don't need it because we have that CPI option some years where the rate adjustment would be less than 4%. So we're pretty confident in our stuff. We're always open to having, a closer look or review. We're really trying to err on transparency rather than just, here's the proposed rate adjustment for this year without backing it up with all these documents. I will admit, these are hard to read. Like I've been a regulator of solid waste for most of my career, and when I started last year, I was like scratching my head how to read this document, and we were going to come to you this year with a cleaner, more streamlined cost of service study, but because of the cyber incident, it pushed everything off. We will come back next year with a little bit simpler to read cost and revenue and projection report for you.
I'm sure we'll all appreciate that.
Mayor,
I will too.
City Manager?
could I just add that in addition to David and I being involved in the rate review, Finance Director Cuellar was very involved. She's on leave right now and not here today. But conservatively, there are probably a dozen email exchanges between the Recology team and Jennifer, and she and David and I have met on multiple occasions as well.
I just forwarded you the independent financial review, so it should be top of your inbox. Councillor Geary?
Yeah, thank you. Just tagging on to Sal's question and your answer about we could explore if we're interested waste. I think 2 or 3 years in a row I've heard you guys give that answer, and each year I've indicated I would be interested, yes. And so I don't know what we need to do to take the next step in that, maybe outside of the friendly confines, or if anyone else has interest in hearing more outside of the friendly confines of the rate increase, ask you guys to come back and actually lay out what it would take. Are we regulating in the way? What would it take for the facility? Is the facility not able to handle it? How could we do anything? What it would take to do that? I am interested in that and have heard that answer a few times now. And so what we can do to get beyond that answer at this rate and review to move forward on that would be appreciated, I think. Sal asked one of my questions about your servicing the coast, which isn't applicable at the moment. And the other one is, the question I ask every year is, can you give me an update on the progress towards construction and demolition, waste, recycling, recovery, whether you can offer that in this franchise area, or if you could carve out exclusions for allowing third-party providers to provide that service in this area?
You want to take it on? You want me to?
You got an
Okay.
update on the wood market?
Yeah, so one of the key components of the C&D waste stream is wood, and there really is no good wood market anymore. We are continuing to see price increases to ship that material. Because we're a relatively small generator of wood compared to other markets like the Portland metro area, we kind of go further down the line in terms of priority to even get in the door of the place where we do ship our clean wood, which is up in Longview. And we chip the wood and it goes to hog fuel, essentially. For the other types of materials that generated on construction sites, it's metals. There's probably some plastic films for which we currently don't really have a market for. And other types of plastics, and that's really it. We do have drop boxes that we can provide for those materials, and I do know that we are exploring, and we started this before the cyber incident that hit us in October. We are exploring sort of a new opportunity to get crews out to support construction sites, as well as pick up illegal dumping, and we had a meeting with Mayor Drabkin about this, to pick up illegal dumping material around the city, and also serve as sort of like a 1-800-GOT-JUNK type service provider and compete in that market space. So through those couple of things, we might be able to provide some additional services. Are you looking for like reporting functions related to the material that's generated, or?
Well, I think the service lacking from my industry available, construction, in your service area, your franchise agreement area here in McMinnville, is a provider to help assist with construction and demolition recovery process. So put it all on site in a sort bin or sort it into multiple bins, and then a provider comes and picks it up and recycles and provides the report out. Less concerned about the report out unless you're in a LEED certified process, but knowing that your waste stream is being, not just everything going in the dump, but the wood gets pulled out, the concrete and masonry gets pulled out and used, the plastics get pulled out and used, the cardboard gets pulled out and used. And it's just really difficult on a project site, and that C&D is just so, this is such a high percentage of the waste piles that you guys see is coming from there, and anything we can do to move the needle on that is huge. So it's less the reporting and more just the actual doing of that on site. And having used a provider in other areas that does that with success and with profitably, I still don't fully understand how we can't get that here or allow it to be done here.
I would, if you'd be willing, I would love to meet with you outside of this and talk about specifically what those services look like.
We did and met last year after this, and after I asked the same question.
Same question.
So,
okay.
happy to do it again.
So I feel like we're not meeting the expectation there, and we need to figure out how to get there. Because if you were able to acquire this service elsewhere, we should be able to provide that here at a reasonable rate. So apologize that hasn't materialized yet. We were working on this other service. We did get sidetracked this year on everything. So.
And I don't want to sound like I'm grabbing your ear just to benefit my company. I think construction is a huge industry, and if you guys are interested in diverting from the waste stream, that is a big nut to crack.
And if I might respond to the organics question as well, we do have a really modern composting facility in North Plains that is sort of the model for how to increase the amount of tonnage that you can put through a relatively small space and expand the type of feedstocks. And so I would put an open invitation to everyone on council if they're interested in taking a tour of that facility to see kind of what it would look like to get there. There's permitting required, there's some capital investment in terms of the technology, but it's able to take more material and process it much faster. What are we at this facility in terms of the turnaround time
On organics?
on organics? It's like 90 days or 120 days. The North Plains one is 65 days. And so I live in Forest Grove. My yard debris with my food waste gets put out on a Monday morning. 60 days later, I can go pick up my finished product from North Plains. And I love that story of that full cycle of sustainability. Like, my food waste goes exactly, I know where it goes, and I can get it as a good product for my garden 60 days later. We can't really do that here because of the site and the constraints and the permit, but those things could change. So I'd be happy to set up a tour for anyone who's interested in seeing North Plains facility.
Councillor Chenoweth.
Thank you for all of your answers and your report. My first question is, in terms of this Recycling Modernization Act, about 10 to 15 years ago, a process was put in place for electronics recycling. Is this essentially the same process that's being put for other industries?
It's different. It's
Okay.
similar. It's extended producer responsibility, but when you buy a television, you pay a fee. I think it's $20 or $25. That fee is consolidated at the state and then shipped out to a third party who manages the Oregon eCycles recycling system, which has recycling collection points all around the state, including at we collect e-scrap as well. So it's really a transactional thing from the consumer paying an extra fee. Then that goes into a pool that pays for the take back of that electronic device.
Let me pause you there for a second. That's not how I understand it happening. I'm paying a fee as a business so that recycling can be done to eCycles Oregon. And I've been doing so for 10 to 15 years. There is no fee being attached other than my prices or whatever they are, but there's no specialized fee that I'm charging customers.
So there's no pass-through to
There's no pass-through.
I thought there was. My apologies. I have that wrong. So there's a fee paid by the retailer.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think some retailers may pass that on to their customers. I don't know for
Quote-unquote manufacturers. And in the computer industry, when you build a tower, you're a manufacturer, even though you're only putting components together to build it, correct? But that makes me a manufacturer, and I'm charged as a manufacturer, not as a retailer.
Okay. So I'm staying corrected. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
The RMA is essentially the state sending a calculated bill to the Circular Action Alliance, which is the producer responsibility organization established or called for under the law. The Circular Action Alliance has a board that consists of multinational corporations like Procter & Gamble, Amazon, Apple, Coca-Cola, and the legislation creates a formula through their rulemaking that says, we think it's going to cost this much money to do this in year one, and you need to pay us. You need to pay the Circular Action Alliance that money that they will then distribute out to jurisdictions throughout the state. So it's a little bit of a different, it's kind of a new approach to EPR.
Mm-hmm.
I apologize about the electronics. I need to read up on my understanding of that, because I always thought, I paid a fee when I bought a TV, but maybe I have that wrong.
Well, I can't speak for larger manufacturers like Sony and the like. Maybe they are attaching a fee to it. I have no idea, but the smaller ones, it's a negligible fee to smaller group people like myself. Part of the reason I'm bringing that up is to better understand what's coming.
Yeah.
Part of the reason I'm bringing that up is I also know, because I have made reference to this to multiple people throughout the state that have said, hey, I've got this old piece of electronic equipment. I need recycled. How do I do this? And I say, oh, take it to your local recycling center. They should have this, and found, much to my surprise, it's not the case. So I wanted to say thank you, because you are one of the few places that I know for sure are accepting all of the electronics recycling, which I think is a mistake not to be being done statewide, particularly since I'm paying for this and so are all the other manufacturers. So thank you. The other question I had was on styrofoam. You mentioned the problem with being able to sell it. Is there any change in the horizons on this issue?
Yes. I know that there is a processor in the Portland metro area that is looking at acquiring a cold press to to take in styrofoam and compress it, not using any kind of thermal compression. So, and part of that is because the Recycling Modernization Act will require the Circular Action Alliance to set up collection or depot or some kind of system to take expanded polystyrene, otherwise known as styrofoam. But the legislation does not allow for thermal densification of styrofoam. It only allows for cold press densification. And as you can guess, styrofoam is super big and bulky. You have to condense it to be able to, make it efficient economically and logistically to transfer it. So the RMA will require the PRO, the Circular Action Alliance, to set up a collection system for styrofoam starting on July 1, 2025. So we know that there are processors in the region who are trying to establish themselves as the processor that will receive a lot of that material because RMA is going to pay for some of that. So it is coming. We can't do it right now, but as soon as the market opens up, we will add that back in.
The gentleman that I spoke with today is talking about having densifiers spread out all over the state of Oregon, so they will be available.
One of the hindrances to the styrofoam collection was the requirement to break it into little bitty pieces before we got there. And I know that there was some discussion that ESA was going to try to have a project of creating a muncher. Is there some solution to that problem that's coming at the same time?
I believe we've received the muncher back, and we've been told if next time we want them to do a project like that, don't. They did an amazing job. They've been working on it for a few years, and so we're ready to give it a try. I would imagine that if it doesn't do the job, there should be some equipment out there that we can invest in.
Okay, because I mean, it's as you can imagine in the IT field, I have a lot of styrofoam, and break it into little pieces is rather labor intensive. Last question, which is far afield, but do you guys foresee, or are you guys in the process of creating some way to, or there are some places where they're burning the waste and then using the generation of energy from that to feed back to the grid? Is that something you guys are entertaining at some of your other locations?
It's not something Recology would invest in. That's a technology that is used all over Europe. I know Portland Metro Region studied that very intensely maybe 6 or 8 years ago, and the read was that Oregonians are kind of opposed to burning of waste because of the emissions, and it's a very expensive facility to build because of the amount of scrubbing that you have to do to clean up those emissions. Marion County has, a waste to energy facility, but there's been no real movement to expand that in the state of Oregon, and it's not something that Recology is interested in investing in.
All right. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Council President, did you want to jump in with any questions? I know he's at a
Yeah.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Recology, and all your team members that provide an exceptional service to our citizens. And you guys are timely and flexible in times of need. So I do appreciate everything you guys do. That said, when we had that rapid halt of debris dumping at Riverbend in 21, and you guys came to us, there was talk of putting some scales in for contractors and citizens that haul trash to your site. We've kind of gotten the runaround on answers for the last few years, and I just wanted a straight answer on where we're at with that. The scales that used to sit next to your shack are no longer there. So it looks like you guys are going backwards on that versus being proactive and installing scales to have an equitable fee structure for dumping.
Yeah, with our
Every
current
time I personally go there's different rates for the same exact pickup bed for the same type of trash. I hear that from continuous citizens and contractors alike. So what you've done the last 3 years doesn't work.
Yeah. So with the current footprint and the way that our facility is designed, it didn't support those scales. We're in the planning phase right now where we're actually putting it out to bid. We're designing expansion on the transfer station and a redesign where we can have in and out scales a little bit safer footprint and design for, so public is separate from commercial. And, but we are definitely in the designing phase, or is designing phase the right? Procurement, okay.
So you're past design and in procurement, so the new facility's been designed, is that what you're saying?
We
For the new
don't have
scales?
the design yet, no, but we are in the beginning stages. So we have corporate involved, and they're meeting with contractors as far as
Doing the initial design, procuring the initial design work. We're not anywhere near,
So
putting
do you,
out the bid.
so are you, and pardon me, Council President, if I'm not trying to jump over you, I'm just, for ease, because I know you're needing to mute on and off, and I'm trying to dissect what you're getting towards. So have you put out an RFP for that design?
so right now they're in the process of doing that.
So do you know when that RFP will go out?
I would imagine it's going to be before this fall.
Council President, do you want to jump back on there?
Yeah, I mean, what prevents you guys from, for the larger dump trailers, just weighing them at the scales that are by the yard debris entrance, and that still has access to your dump location?
Yeah, one of the problems we have is traffic and backing out onto Orchard Avenue and the railroad tracks there. So unfortunately, that's just not a good setup for the scales there. But there will be a design here hopefully soon, but they are moving forward. It is in the budget, and it's going to continue to be in the budget to progress.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to take us back to the styrofoam just for 1 second. So when we added that a few years ago, I can't recall if we added curbside glass, curbside compost, and styrofoam all at the same time. I do recall that when we added curbside glass and curbside compost, that we agreed to increase the franchise rate even above what you were asking at the time to offset that. And I can't recall if we did the same thing with styrofoam. It would seem like that's kind of the practice we've been in. And so if we did that and now that service isn't being offered, has that been taken into your requested increase amount, or essentially if we increased rates to provide styrofoam recycling and that's not being provided, have you taken that percentage back out of this rate request?
Thank you, Mayor. We've not taken it out of the rate request. There's a couple things at play. One is we have, relatively quickly, we thought about how do we provide service to McMinnville customers that can kind of compensate while there is no market for styrofoam. And that's why we added, we took a look at the McMinnville Plastics Recycling Project list of materials that they collect, those hard to recycle plastics. And we added containers at the transfer station for those so that customers can drop those off year round. A second component is that we do know that styrofoam is coming back. Under the Recycling Modernization Act, effective July 1, there has to be a collection program in place for styrofoam. We're going to have to rework our cost report to reflect those new revenues coming in from the RMA. And so I think that at that time, it makes sense to see, how do we address that? That there was a point, Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, there was a 0.5% increase. I do want to point out we're not seeking the 88% target return on revenue with this proposed rate adjustment. We're seeking something a little bit lower than that. You could look at that and say, well, that 0.5% is kind of in there because we're not setting rates to 88%. So there's that. But then finally, I would say I wasn't here. I don't know if Ernie was here at the time. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me to put a transfer station cost into the collection routes. The rates for the collection services, those are two separate businesses. And so I think our interest might be to extricate ourselves from that 0.5% anyway going forward and let the RMA resources come into play, and hopefully there's not going to be any need for that anymore anyway. because it's funded through the RMA.
Mayor, I don't think they ever did collect at the curbside styrofoam.
No, that's not what I was saying. It was just to add it at the depot. That's why my question was. And when you were doing that styrofoam collection, I know there were a lot of issues with it. You needed people to, there were a lot of issues with just the bulkiness of it, which you already mentioned. And from what I understood from previous conversations, that issue stayed all the way to getting to Agrilix and Tualatin, I think it's where it was. I'm sorry to hear they've shuttered, by the way. That's really unfortunate for all of us. But then that bulkiness, meant more trucking to move the same, et cetera. So if you're looking at bringing a styrofoam solution back, then are you also looking at kind of dealing with that? Are you planning on having some sort of pulping or, shredding, some sort of teeth or something that could help with that problem to not only offset your own trucking costs, but to deal with the holdup that would happen every time you would try to go recycle your styrofoam?
Absolutely. I mean, honestly, if it was an issue with a little bit of styrofoam that we were getting from the community, and now it's going to increase quite a bit, there's going to be definitely a need. We're hoping that the muncher was going to come to fruition. But it's definitely a tool that we're going to need for sure.
The good news is the RMA will fund that kind of thing. The PRO is obligated by the legislation to provide styrofoam collection and pay for it. So that's not a cost that your ratepayers are going to incur. When it does come back, it's going to be funded through the RMA. And their initial program plan for the first year, I think it was estimated $60 to $75 million coming into the state, and then doubling or tripling in subsequent years. So it's not an insignificant amount of money that is going to be coming in from the packaging producers to pay for some of these additional services. So that's why I was saying, I think going forward, we're going to see less recycling-related impacts on rate adjustments going forward, because the way the RMA is written, it's supposed to level that recycling cost out so that your rate setting process is more predictable and less volatile due to recycling markets. And this is a great year to see here's a disruption in the recycling system because markets went away, and the RMA is going to address that.
Okay. And then I want to also bring it back to kind of the alternative waste stream management. So you mentioned your zero waste position that's coming up. I also see we have representation from Zero Waste, a nonprofit, in the room. I believe you've been working together. And Councilor Peralta also brought up one of our McMinnovations, as we like to call them, but that's the development of Chippewa Farms and their ability to deal with biomass. Are you laughing at McMinnovation? That's an MEDP coined term. Thank you. So we've got a number of them. And so could you expand on that a little bit? And I'll echo it, even though you've heard it a few times up here. This council has maybe not always in this current composition, but in my time of service, the council as a body has always kind of pushed towards more long-term sustainable options for the city of McMinnville, as demonstrated through the styrofoam, the curbside glass, the curbside composting. So, and you're definitely hearing that desire to continue and get past where we are, if where we are is status quo. So could you just expand on that body a little bit?
Sure. And we have partnered to some degree with Zero Waste McMinnville, and we have supported, for example, the International Pinot Festival with providing containers so that food waste could be separated out by festival participants, and that material has gone to Chapel Farms for processing with their black soldier fly larva process, and we support that. We are happy to explore ideas for collecting commercial food waste. It's I think they will tell you that it has to be pretty clean to get it into their process, or it has to be cleaned in some way. But as your franchised solid waste hauler, we're happy to continue to coordinate with them and provide collection of material and deliver it to a site, a processor, so long as they're permitted by the state. And we're a partner in that, and that that is consistent with our overall company goals of reducing the amount of waste that goes to landfill. Like I said, we're not a landfill company. You know, we're happy to provide that service. So, Mayor, I mean, we would love to explore ways to add more food waste diversion. And right now, you don't have a commercial food waste diversion program in the city, and that's an avenue to explore with staff and you. It'll come with additional containers and space constraints and a need for more education and outreach, a commitment from the food waste generating businesses in the city to keep contamination low. All those things are things that we're familiar with and we can support.
So when you say contamination, you're talking about plastics or metals or other things. You're not talking about any type of biomass. Because from my understanding, which it was, I just even earlier today met with some of the folks from Chippewa Farms, and that program, they can ingest any biological, they can ingest and compost, so to speak, any organics. So is that the contamination you're talking about, or plastics?
Plastic primarily, but there's a lot of cutlery that ends up in commercial food waste streams. We see it at our composting facilities all the time. But plastic film, plastic bags, plastic serviceware, drink cups, even things that look like paper, like those cardboard-looking to-go containers, have a layer of plastic film on them. And, you know, I'm not familiar with exactly what the black soldier flies can digest, but I know hard plastics are probably not something they want to feed them.
I would definitely recommend that you have a meeting with them and come to understand that technology. They're getting investment, they're not just getting local support. They just brought in a tremendous grant to really expand their business, and to me it reflects kind of the desire here. I asked earlier today if they could digest construction materials like timber, even if it had been with whatever might come through, and the answer was yes. Not the way that that's currently set up, but yes. So I see a lot of possibility in there. You also mentioned that we with staff should explore a commercial food waste program. With other programs we've talked about in the past, it's always been Recology that's brought back the information about what it would mean to stand up a program. So I'm not sure, I guess I didn't understand the comment that we should explore, if that's something we want, that we should explore it with our staff, because to me that would be on kind of your responsibility list.
I apologize, let me reframe that. We're happy to work with staff on investigating how to set up a food waste program and what that would entail in terms of collection costs, processing, where that material is going to go. We're happy to work with staff on that and provide all of the data from our side. We just need to be asked to seriously consider that, and we're happy to do that.
Okay. And then changing gears just a little bit, I want to say thank you. I know when we were doing really regular cleanups on Marsh Lane and Dustin Court, especially, that you worked with our Public Works Department, and I know that you did a lot of hauling at no charge for the city in our attempts to keep those roadways clean and free of debris. So I want to thank you for your partnership on that. You also mentioned that we met a number of months ago, and and the outcome of that, and I'm sorry I don't have those notes in front of me right now, but was that you brought back 3 potential programs that you might be able to offer that could kind of self-invest in helping the people keep the city clean. And I know at the time that you also tied that to the franchise rate, even though what we just talked about was that the franchise rate would have to do with pickup and not with other. And so I'm kind of wondering if you've continued to explore that. Especially, there was one program we talked about that was you brought it forward. You're using it in another municipality. It's a bag exchange program. It's like essentially a branded waste bag of some kind that people can fill and bring in and exchange. If I remember correctly, you said it was really effective with having people kind of clean their own sites or camps when they were didn't have other. There was no curbside garbage service happening while they were trying to find a place to sleep every night. So have you continued to look into that?
Yeah, thank you for that, Mayor, and that's exactly right. There was 3 program elements that we discussed, and the bag program is in operation in the Portland metro area still, I think after about 4 or 5 years of implementation. So that's something that we're still, I'll be honest, like the cyber incident sort of waylaid all of our planning for 6 months, and we're just starting to feel like we're getting back to normal, and so that's a priority for us to take a look at all of those program elements again and see what we can bring to McMinnville. So I apologize for the delay in that planning process. We got buried.
Got hammered, yeah.
I'm really, I want to say, like, I'm really proud of our operations teams who collected garbage throughout that time without access to route lists, without access to customer service data. You may not have seen or heard many complaints about our services, and that's because of the quality, the history, the memory of the employees who are out there on the trucks day in and day out picking up garbage to make sure, and recycling, to make sure that nobody was missed, because we were really flying blind for a number of months. And so I just want to add that to it. Like, it was a pretty stressful time for the company, and we're finally coming out of it. So we do have opportunity to go back and start to relook at some of those programs we discussed.
Yeah, I'm really sorry that you had that experience. I can't imagine. It must have been.
It was brutal.
It was.
And worse for the people on the operations side and the customer service side than me, for sure.
Yeah, a lot of creativity needed. Additional questions from the council? Is anybody, Councilor Peralta, you indicated early on that you
Good.
might have more?
Thanks, Mayor.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for the presentation and your time here today.
Thank you.
I will now go to advice and information items, starting with reports from councilors on committee and board assignments. I'll start to my left this evening with Councilor Geary.
Thank you. DEIAC will be meeting Thursday. That is a little bit of a meeting with the consultant to keep that assessment work on track. MIRAC will be meeting Wednesday the 10th. Affordable Housing will have a joint meeting with the Planning Commission later this month, and the 3rd Street Improvement Group will be meeting on the 16th, so in between a lot of meetings at the moment.
Thank you so much. Councilor Chenoweth?
Nothing to report.
Thank you. Councilor Peralta?
MCM 11 approved their budget. No report from COG. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilor Menke?
I believe there's a YCAP meeting on the 23rd. I'm sorry, I have nothing else to report. Oh, I take that back. The Planning Commission and the Affordable Housing Committee is meeting to discuss transient lodging during the Planning Commission's meeting this month. There will be no Affordable Housing Committee meeting.
Thank you. I don't have too much to report this evening. I did have the opportunity to host a number of our McMinnovators earlier today with MEDP and our state treasurer, and talk about how we can best be aware and leveraging the state for help in building or growing our homegrown businesses here. And I took a vacation for almost a week. It was pretty great. We'll now go, that's an announcement because it never happens. So Jeff Towery, City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. And I can confirm I saw photographic evidence of said vacation. A couple items to report. City Attorney Leitenberg, City Recorder Cisneros, and I all attended the webinar today. I think Councilor Geary was able to attend as well, the webinar on the Supreme Court decision on the Grants Pass case. Claudia and David and I will be meeting tomorrow. We'll put together our notes and a staff report. I think there's some next steps that we want to bring back to you, so we'll have that to you soon. The webinar was recorded and will be available. We will get directions out to you about how to get access to that if you'd like to watch the recording. It was a tight 1 hour. They kept it right on time. Note that we expect Chief Scales to return to duty on Monday of next week, so we're looking forward to seeing him back in the office, and we are planning to formally launch the recruitment for his replacement on August 1st, and some of you may have already seen some meeting notices to start to hold some time for some community engagement aspects of that recruitment. I have nothing else to report.
Thank you. And before we go forward, I realized that I skipped over Council President Adam Garvin, as I sometimes do when people are on Zoom. Council President, did you have a report?
YCOM was canceled today. Airport Commission last week had a scheduling conflict, and McMinnville hasn't met since their last meeting, but thank you.
All right. Thank you. City Attorney David Leitenberg.
Thank you, Mayor. Nothing from the legal department tonight.
Thank you, Captain Simons.
Nothing to report.
Thank you. Leland, are you going now, or?
I can just cover the whole public.
You'll cover the whole, you've got
Yeah,
three.
we got the whole.
You got four.
I know.
Okay, go for it.
Actually, we don't have anything to report minus our item that we're going to do in it, but did want to recognize our conveyance, streets, and park maintenance crews who have been outside in the heat the last couple of days, working hard still. We're doing all we can to make sure they're staying safe out there, staying cool as they can be. But if you see them out there working, give them a thank you, because it's hot out there.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to Deputy City Recorder Daniel Ruiz.
Just notate for your calendars, National Night Out is scheduled for Tuesday, August 6th. That's all.
Thank you. And Community Development Director Richards, I see, is on Zoom.
Good evening. I just wanted to let people know we have a couple of opportunities for people to volunteer on some of our planning committees. We are currently recruiting for our Housing Production Strategy Project Advisory Committee. If people are interested in helping develop a toolkit for how to incentivize the housing that we need in this community in partnership with our development community. We also have an opening on our Urban Renewal Advisory Committee. This is called MURAC. It needs to be a business or property owner in the Urban Renewal District. But this is a committee that advises the City Council in their role as the Urban Renewal Board on how to implement the Urban Renewal Plan. And a little note for that is they actually are implementing things with funding. So it's always fun to have funding for their ideas. And then thirdly, we just learned today that Gary Langenwalter needs to resign from the Planning Commission in the fall. So we're going to start recruitment for his position. And that is in Ward 3.
Thank you. I had somebody reach out with a question. If the Housing Production Advisory Council, does that have a residency requirement attached to it?
No, we have, we'll be reviewing committee members based on representing different demographics in our community. We are looking for people who live here unless they represent another type of housing choice for McMinnville in terms of production, development, that type of thing.
Okay, the person that asked me lived just outside city limits, so that's why I'm putting it. Well, thank you very, oh, yep, Councilor Geary.
I saw the link for the application for that housing project, but it's one of those ones that has 3 committees listed on it, and you check the one interested, and some of those other ones were transportation TSP update project. So none of those other ones are launched. It's just that one that you referenced that you're looking for.
It's just that one that we're actively recruiting for. We will accept applications for the other 2 project advisory committees because we expect to launch those later this fall. In terms of those committees getting up and going. But right now, the Project Advisory Committee for the Housing Production Strategy will start meeting at the end of this month or early August. So we are actively trying to fill that committee.
So later this fall, we're going to get the TSP update up and running.
Knock on wood, yes. We'll learn more about that. We have scheduled a work session with City Council for July 17th to go over the long-range work plan for planning.
Thank you. Before we move on, your announcements reminded me of one other thing, which is that, as you may all know, we have a process by which we appoint people to most committees and commissions. The McMinnville Water and Light Commission is called out specifically in the charter, and it does not have the same process. And so this year we are implementing a new process, and currently available on the Water and Light website is a form that has a letter of interest, and then the possibility to answer some short questions about skill sets, et cetera, and things that might be valuable to that committee. We're not changing what's in the charter. All of those letters of interests and applications will come to me. I will recommend an appointment to the council per the charter, but as opposed to asking somebody I already know, I am asking people to let me know that they are qualified and interested in that service. And so I'm pretty excited about that. It just went out a couple days ago. It'll stay open for a couple of months. We are hoping to get as robust of interest as we have generated for our other committees and commissions since we've reformed those practices, which has been tremendous. All right, thank you so much.
Mayor, I just wanted to add one more thing. I apologize. I wanted to let council know that the city did receive the $500,000 CDBG grant that we applied for housing rehabilitation in our community for low and moderate income households. So we'll be putting that program together and implementing it here in partnership with the Housing Authority very soon.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for sharing that good news. I think we're going to send out a press release about it, aren't we?
Yes.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay, have councilors had an opportunity to review the May 24 cash and investment report? And any questions? Not seeing any. Does any councilor need to have any item removed from the consent agenda and heard on its regular place on the agenda? And does any councilor need to recuse themselves from voting on the consent agenda? And if not, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilor Peralta and a second from Councilor Geary. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 And nay? Thanks. And all those opposed say nay? And the motion passes unanimously. Did I get the motion in the second right? I heard it first in my left ear. Was it you, Councilor Chenoweth?
It was either me or Menke, but I don't care.
I definitely heard it over here first. So.
Definitely was not me.
And it wasn't, I could tell by the look on your face. So if I could correct that for the record, that the second was made by Councilor Chenoweth. Okay, and now we have some resolutions. We're going to consider resolution number 2024-40, a resolution authorizing execution of a purchase and sale agreement for 6.95 acres of industrial zone property with Pacific North Construction LLC. And I would like to call on James Lofton or Jeffrey Hunsaker to present, or both.
I think I'm taking this one today. James did help put together the staff report while I was on vacation last week, so I'm very thankful for that.
Thank you.
Just as a reminder, we've been looking at the future needs for our operations and wastewater facilities. We did a space analysis study, brought that to the council in a work session a couple months ago. At that time, the preferred alternative was for a co-located site next to the wastewater reclamation facility. This property became available, so we did an analysis on this property. To look at it, it has some significant pros with it. The room for future expansion of our facilities and enough space for all that we need. It's within the city limits, therefore falls under the city land use. Does not require fire and police facility relocations. Leaves current wastewater reclamation facility property in place for future treatment expansion. And the existing building on site can be used as a maintenance shop as is. We had an appraisal done and then did further research on additional improvements that have been made to the site that the appraisal did not capture. We also looked further into the avoided costs with specifically the cost to relocate the fire training facility and the police building that are out there on site. And with all that information, we came up with a negotiated price with the seller of $3.4 million, and believe that is a fair price, and recommend to the council purchase of the property at that value.
Thank you. Is there council discussion? Councilor Geary.
Great work. I think this is going to be huge for Public Works and all 4 of your departments and everyone who works in and around you guys. I think this is a big deal. Just kind of stating for the record, the funds of $4 million for this acquisition budgeted in the wastewater capital fund, 77.89 land acquisition, is out of wastewater capital fund, which is our long-range plan pot of money for this specific type of project identified on that list to help acquire this type of project for the next 20 some odd years of work relating to these type of things, correct?
That is correct.
So it's not just that we have $4 million lying around and we're choosing to spend on this piece of property because it's a good idea at the moment. This is
It is identified as part of our CIP program that is in the existing facility plan, which we are updating currently as well.
so our well-planned for system and well-funded wastewater master plan. I think I'm getting off the rails here, but this is the $4 million we have. This is planned for this acquisition, and it's part of that long-range plan.
That is correct.
Thank you. Woo!
Other questions? Mr. Leitenberg.
Thank you, Mayor. I would just like to recommend a slight amendment to the resolution as recommended and attached. In number 2, about halfway down the resolution, it refers to the purchase and sale agreement shall include 6 months rent back. That was a poor choice in terms. I would like to replace that and recommend that you replace that, the words rent back, with occupancy license, both there and in the line immediately below that. Where it says rent back, that was a poor choice, occupancy license. And so if you ask for a motion, please do so as amended.
Okay, and just for clarity, the way that I had interpreted that when I read it was essentially that there's an offset for 6 months of use of space.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. I would ask for a motion to approve resolution number 2024-40 as amended.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilor Geary and a second from Council President Garvin.
What? Come on.
He's it's rough out here today.
I'm kidding.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 And those opposed say nay. And the resolution has passed unanimously. Congratulations. It's a big deal. We will now consider resolution number 2024-41, a resolution of the City of McMinnville approving a collection rate increase not to exceed 4.7% for Recology, Inc. And I'd like to call on David Leitenberg, our city attorney, to present.
Thank you, Mayor. I have very little to add except to note that this is the rate increase that was discussed earlier with our partners from Recology. If there are additional questions, they're still here and can answer them, but otherwise I believe that was more or less sussed out.
Okay, thank you. I also think, correct me if I'm wrong, but some of that more specific direction that was being hinted at earlier, at least historically, this was kind of the time where we would put that much more specific direction into any action. Is that what, if the council would like to do any of that, would this be the appropriate time to do that?
If you would like to add to the resolution one of the reasons we brought tonight was because we've got another council meeting before the rates would come into effect. We'd be happy to bring back an amended resolution with more specific things in this, if that's what you would like.
Thank you. I will open this up for council discussion.
Are you thinking of sort of directing them to look into food waste and other? Okay, I'd prefer those separate. I think we should launch that effort
I would agree.
regardless of the,
Just
independent of the rate.
resolution tonight is word.
Yeah, or do consider them both tonight, but have them be separate. Just sort of move to direct our partners at Recology to XYZ, and then separate from that be the rate discussion.
Okay.
Would be my preference.
No problem. Just wanted to open it up. Right?
I think, if I may, Mayor, what you're getting at was similar when we asked them to haul trash outside of our area, and that was tied to a rate increase. And when we brought on glass collection, that was tied to a rate increase from memory. And so if there was things we wanted, typically or historically, it's been tied to rate increases and hasn't been separated. And it's our one tool we have to have accountability. As we've seen for the last 3 years, we're told things, but we're told the same thing year after year.
I would personally like to see this resolution tonight, whatever we're going to do with it, but I'd rather they come back with appropriate wording and a plan for next time.
Additional council discussion?
Go ahead, Chris.
Councilor Chenoweth and then Councilor Peralta.
Thank you, Sal. And thank you, Mayor. I would tend to lean more, I get what you're saying, Adam, but I would tend to lean more in the favor of Kelly Menke. I'd like to have them come back and have a work session where we're specifically having this conversation and having it more robust, rather than trying to kind of shoehorn it in on this particular ordinance.
Thank you. Any other council discussion? Councilor Peralta, sorry.
Yeah, I think that Councilor Garvin is right. I think that there are some things that have been hanging out for the last couple of years that we thought were moving along okay, that really don't seem to have moved forward the way that I would have hoped. And I kind of agree that this is the one opportunity that we have to have some accountability for moving in that direction. So my preference would be to not pass the rate increase tonight and to encourage Recology to go back and meet with both the city related to the Recycling Modernization Act and meet with Zero Waste to talk about the expansion of services that they were talking about and come back with a more robust proposal rather than just approving a 4.7% increase. And then apropos of the increase itself, they described a couple of different methods for accounting. One of those could be consumer price index, which would be less than what was asked for in the rate increase. So I'm not opposed to the rate increase. I'll probably support it when it does come to us, if it's not tonight. But I would like to see some movement towards some of the priorities with regard to improvements in recycling and recovery. I was really distressed, actually, probably most disappointed by the answer related to construction debris that related to your questions, because I thought that there was more categories of waste that were being considered as part of those waste streams. And so I was a little disheartened, honestly, tonight. So that's where I'm at.
All right, well, I am either open to more council discussion or for anybody to make a motion of some kind, either to approve the rate increase as presented or with any amendment. But I will now entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution number 2024-41.
Right, I have a motion from Councilor Menke to approve resolution number 2024-41. Do I have a second?
I'll second it and let it go to a vote.
And I have a second from Councilor Chenoweth. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, say nay.
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 And the resolution fails 3-2. So the direction that I understand is coming back from that is to do some additional follow-up work with our city staff, and to do some additional work with the Zero Waste nonprofit, and bring that back to us in a presentation, and the other waste management tools that are developing in the area, and bring that back to us for an additional presentation, so we can bring a resolution with a rate increase back before the council. Is that what everyone else heard? Okay. Okay, thank you all so much for your time this evening. Thank you for coming, and I will now adjourn the council meeting at 8:36 p.m.